I hope you saw the title of today's podcast and it sparked your curiosity. Today, I'm chatting with my friend Kara Ryska, and Kara's primary focus is life coaching for special needs moms. But this conversation is focused on self leadership for any and all parents. Kara is so inspiring. I know that you're going to love her as much as I do, and I suspect that you'll leave feeling empowered. Hi, I'm Allison and Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Well, hi, Kara. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to finally have you on the podcast. We met several years ago at a conference and have stayed in touch. And since we met, you've pivoted, and I've loved watching you combine your passion for coaching and your passion for supporting moms. And today we're going to talk about a really interesting topic, and that's self-leadership. But the first question I always like to ask my guests is, what inspired you to pursue your vocation and to start your business?
That's a great question. Well, I'll go way back. It won't be too long, but I'll go way back. So my first career was in commercial and residential landscape. So different from what I do now. So I was a project manager, a designer. I got to build like the most beautiful creations ever. So it was a really fun job. And I drove around a ton. And so I always joke, I'm like, I have a PhD in podcasts because I listened to so many podcasts during that time. And actually one of them was Amy Porterfield's podcast, and which is the conference that we met at. And I drove around wondering a lot, what is it that I want to do? And I finally settled on coaching. And so I got trained up. I, did all the things because I was like, I don't want to just be some like, I'm a life coach. And I really wanted to be legitimate because, there's a lot of spectrum out there when it comes to coaching. And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Oh, naturally, I want to, kind of work in the space that I grew up in, a very male-dominated industry. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna like coach women inside of companies and leadership and blah, blah, blah. And it was good. And I love business. And so it was okay. And it was a couple years in that I had a coaching community, and I had happened to get an email actually from the school on my way to this gathering. And this particular gathering, we always start our meetings off with, what do you need to say or share to be present here today? So it's like very coachy, right? Like we're like all geeky into like being present and all that. And so the thing that I decided to share is like, I just want to read this email and I don't want to be alone. And so I just read the email, and I just was allowing my experience over here that was so isolating and so scary to be witnessed. And this particular email was for me one of many. But it was describing some behaviors that my son had done. And in this case, I think he had like, at this point, like damaged a door or something. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, what are you supposed to do? I offered to replace the door. Like, what are they asking? Like, these emails are very unclear. I have some comments for sure on like how to write an email to a parent about a thing at school, right? But that's totally a different topic. So I had this really impactful moment for myself of having community with me, witnessing this really hard part of my life. Mm-hmm. And because these people, they were all coaches that know me quite well, they really reflected like the positioning that I had as a coach and bridging this place of what I call like the special needs mom community or world, and kind of bridging them together. Because, what's interesting is, there's a lot of different types of coaching. A lot of coaching happens different places. Business coaching, leadership coaching, life coaching, many different modalities even, but
Sleep coaching,
there you go, right? Where you're bringing like expertise. And so I'm often really looking at leadership.
Right.
That kind of is the foundation of my training and really where I focus. And what I also saw so clearly is that, oh my gosh, the same exact coaching that I'm doing over in business and corporate with leaders is actually what my moms need, is what
Right.
I needed. And so I made the pivot, and actually I think it took a little bit until, I created a podcast. And so I feel like obviously it took a bit to find my groove there, but it definitely developed. And now I feel like I have this ultra rich community that I get to benefit from the podcast, from the community, and of course, like working with my clients. It's one of those things where, I get to be part of it, and it feels like such a privilege and honor.
And I have loved watching your transition, because when I met you, you were doing coaching for women in business, and I could tell that you were good at doing that. But as I've watched you transition, it's so clear to me that you have just merged two worlds that it just feels like you're where you're meant to be from my perspective. And it's been a treat to watch you evolve with how you pursue your coaching. And just as way background for those of us, for those in my audience who don't know you, how old is your son who has special needs?
Yeah, so he is 14. So I'll give it just quick little snapshot. So I also have 4 children, and my son Levi was diagnosed with brain tumor when he was 2. So he was a little guy, and our life went completely off track from where I ever imagined that we would be. So clearly that was a very pivotal part of our whole family. And he has gone on to have multiple brain tumors. And so part of his survival story is that he has many disabilities. And I won't go into the details of them. People can look them up on my website. But needless to say, our life and family was not how we thought it would be. So that also, I think, as you're saying, like, it is where I'm meant to be. I wholeheartedly believe that. I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. I think when we get connected to something we really, really care about, we're willing to go farther and dig deeper and do the harder thing more so than if we don't, right? So it's like I found myself putting myself out there because I cared so much, not just about my family, but actually, like, to me, it's like it is my purpose. And so for me to connect these moms together with one another, but more so to reconnect them with who they are. Mm-hmm. Like, that is like magic, getting to watch women almost come alive again. They've sacrificed so much to literally survive. And so, I could go on about how much I love this, but that's kind of also part of the evolution story.
And today we want to dive into self-leadership, which I think all moms can benefit from hearing about. Really, all people, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. All people can benefit from self-leadership. And I want to hear how you define self-leadership. But already, just when I think of the term, I would think of you, because I follow you very closely on Instagram. And I am in awe so often by watching you navigate your son's medical appointments, the teachers, the schools, and you have 3 other children that you're actively parenting, and you just show up like a boss. And so I look at you and think, oh, if someone's going to talk about self-leadership, it would be you. So let's talk about how you would define self-leadership, particularly as it relates to the parents.
Well, to preface my answer, I think what I'll say is that the type of coaching that I'm particularly invested in and trained in is what's called ontological coaching. So it's a big, long word for the study of nature of who we're being, right? So it's really looking less at like what you're doing, like, do this thing, rah, rah, rah. That is, of course, part of life, but we roll it all the way back to really look at who we're being. Like the being informs the doing. And so being is identity. And so when I look at self-leadership, really it comes down to owning the identity of leader. And when you step into the role of leader, I think it changes your vantage point a little bit, or a lot bit actually. And so I think self-leadership looks like somebody really acknowledging the agency that they have. It's using the tools that they have. Big one is creating a team. Right? If you look at really good leaders, really good ones, they've got really good teams, and they bring on support after support after support. They don't do it on their own.
Right.
And so I think that's where it's like there's this right. So now let's look at like the role of motherhood and fatherhood. For whatever reason, I can take a really amazing leader inside of a business and put her in the role of motherhood, and she drops all of the identity of leader. And so that self-leadership...
I could raise my hand for that. I was that person when I became a parent. I could crush it at work, and I actually went into parenting thinking I'm going to crush this, and I immediately did not leave. From the moment I went into the hospital to deliver that baby, I felt like I was not leading this process, despite what I thought.
I just heard you tell your story about this. Where was it? I must have been listening to your podcast. But I heard you tell part of your story, and I could picture this, right? Because I could picture you, I've gotten the chance to meet you in person, the energy that you have, and I could see how boss-like you were. And so for you to say, I did not, it didn't quite go that way. Well, here's what's interesting. My guess is that a big part of the surprise of motherhood for you was that you didn't have control over many of the things that you would have needed to kind of lead through the same lens that you did at work.
100%. I thought I would.
You had authority.
Yep. And I thought if I knew how to do it, if I'd read a book, I would execute like I do at work. Here's how you do something, you execute, and it works. And there was too much out of my control. The things I read didn't work. So I got defeated very quickly.
Yeah. And we've all been there, right? I will not pretend like this has not, I've evolved, right? And even now, most of my personal work is really stepping out of very disempowered places. Like, for instance, I deal with a lot of hospital stuff, a lot of insurance stuff. And if you want to start to feel real powerless and out of control, I recommend that you do that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many systems that we're outside of, that we don't have any real true authority over. And so it's really a quick path to really feeling very powerless. And so the work is to actually know how to let go of the parts of the beliefs of the identity that has you feeling so stuck and powerless, and to be able to kind of know what you do have control over and know what to accept and where to fight. Mm-hmm. And that there's this tension that I'm actually really grappling with in my own life right now. Acceptance is the key to everything. I wholeheartedly believe that. But some parts of our lives are really hard to accept because we make them mean all these things. And so, but there's this tension, in acceptance, then, will we stop fighting for something?
Right.
I don't know. And so there's this, I guess I'm all over the place, but there's just so many little things that are I think, part of this identity of a leader. And of course, I apply the same focus of any leader, and then it's just applying it to how you run your own life. That's kind of the self leader that I'm looking at.
And so when someone comes into your community, if someone is listening and saying, okay, yeah, this resonates with me. I want to think about self-leadership within my home, within my family unit. How would you even start? What's the things that you need to think about? You've mentioned team, which I think is so powerful, and I could not agree more. I would also kind of define that as the village. Like, you have got to grow that village. And for me, the first person I hired was a sleep coach. And after that, not only did it inspire me to become a sleep coach, I hire out anytime I get stuck. I think there's an expert. I don't need to spin my wheels here. So I need to find the expert, decide who I want to hire, and get educated on this, or whether it's a therapist or, whatever it is. And it was once I made that first move at the sleep coach, I'm like, bring it on. I don't need to spin my wheels on all these. I just find people that resonate with me and move forward. But what are good starting points for parents, whether they are special needs parents or just parents who are overwhelmed and not in that leadership role in their household or in their parenting journey? Where would you point them that they could feel like they have a win of like stepping into their power?
Yeah. Well, this is something that actually applies everywhere. So in addition to the special needs coaching I do, I still do coach in corporate and business. So I actually have, I only do it kind of by referral, and I'm more local than not. But it's fun because I get to kind of still have a totally different perspective, and kind of see, again, I'll meet with, a 65-year-old gentleman that's working on something in his life. And then I'll, work with my special needs mom, and lo and behold, it's the same general theme. And this is where I would point them. And this is what comes up over and over again in coaching. So there's this spectrum. I call it two different things. Some people don't like the first language that I'll use, but it's the language, or it's the spectrum, of a victim and responsibility. And there are actually true victims, so we don't want to disregard that. But what I'm referring to is when you're relating to yourself as at the effect of something. So, I mentioned the whole hospital gig, right? Like, oftentimes it feels very real that I'm at the effect of the person on the phone telling me I can't get the appointment that I want. And if I stop there, then that is me being a victim of this whole organization. And again, also the language I use for that part, that side of the spectrum, is at effect, right? So you're almost like picture, somebody, I don't know, I'm picturing somebody still like having somebody like hit them and do all these things. Like, you're just at the effect of whatever is coming at you. So you can picture how powerless this state is. Oftentimes language for this side of the spectrum is, I can't, or if I do this, then they, right? So it's like this kind of held hostage by these predictions that you have that you don't know if are true. I should is generally coming from that side of the spectrum. And over there on the other side, I'm talking about responsibility. And this isn't the kind of responsibility of, I've paid all my bills on time and I ran the dishwasher this morning. Like, that's not what we're looking at. It's really the coming at something with the identity of somebody who is able and has the capacity to create what they want. So language for this side would be at cause. So you are causing and creating. And where this is interesting, it kind of falls apart. Sometimes people, like, you can kind of see where people fall when, like, let's just put like totally unrelated analogy out there, like a sales team. So really good salespeople, they hit their goals. Really poor salespeople, they say, well, I couldn't because the widgets weren't delivered to me on time. Or Johnny didn't email me back, right? So it's like that. There's this like, I couldn't because they,
right.
Whereas on the other side, like, it's like, no, I created this. I had the goal, and I'm obviously like, this is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I think it illustrates the way of being that we're contrasting. And so I think that that's where we always start. And what's interesting is when you learn to kind of pay attention to these concepts, you'll hear it in people speaking. I'm sure you can even pick up on things, and maybe you even can think of an example of a mom or a parent that's come to you feeling at the effect of whatever's happening. And so you'll start to pick up on this language. And even so, one of my jobs, or one of the main things that I do, is reflect back when I'm hearing somebody coming from that victim or at effect. And once we become aware of that, because usually we're not aware of it, it feels real. It feels factual. We would probably even argue that it is a fact because that's how it feels for us. But when somebody else reflects that actually, that isn't a fact, then we kind of we regain that access to choosing. Because when we're in it, when we're so in it, we don't see that there's any other opportunities. So having, someone like myself, a coach, or of course you in your sleep expertise, reflecting back something that they didn't see, it becomes really, really powerful because they now have this awareness that they can go apply a new effort or a new intention to and come up with very, very different results. And even just that awareness, it's really fun in sessions to kind of see the energy of somebody coming in, like where they're just feeling heavy and weighed down and just kind of very stuck. And when they see this, it's like a light bulb's gone. Like they just feel lighter. They see the opening. They see the path forward. And so can you imagine like coming in thinking there is no way out, and then coming out being like, oh my gosh, like I not only see a way through, I know that I can do it.
Right.
So,
well, what you're making me think of is the conversation that I have talked on this podcast before, their turning point, which I guess my dad was doing a good job of coaching me. When I hit that rock bottom of complete overwhelm, defeat, my oldest didn't sleep, I was exhausted and suffering from terrible postpartum anxiety that I didn't recognize at the time. And in that conversation, I'm realizing now listening to you, my father made me switch my mindset because he started by saying, we're really worried about you and we could tell you're not yourself. And I then kind of unloaded. I'm just so tired and I'm overwhelmed and I have these terrible visions and I'm just, yes, you should be worried about me was basically where I took it. And I remember him looking shocked by hearing, some of these visions I was having and intrusive thoughts I had. And then he kind of took a beat and he said, I want you to realize that you are a resourceful person and you are someone who actually has resources, which is a privilege I have. And he said, I want you to think about how you're using that resources. And I want you to stop and I want you to figure out what help you need. I don't know what help you need, but I can tell you need help and that you need to change your mindset to how am I going to help myself? Because that's going to be your only way out. And so I think, he didn't know, was it I needed therapy? Was it I need medication? What the turning point was I hired the sleep coach and I got sleep because I thought, where am I suffering most? And it was, I can't sleep. And that's consuming so much of my thoughts that my child can't sleep. And I've done all the things and I can't. I was very much, I cannot get this child to sleep. So I was stuck in that. And he really kind of said, I just want you to go home and start this new year thinking about how you're going to help yourself. And it changed everything for me. So it's funny listening to stuff like, oh, my dad helped me have a little bit of that shift where I went home and all I focused on is what's my first step? My first step is I'm going to figure out who can help me teach my child to sleep. And then it all kind of started to fall into place.
Yeah. And you see this like shift from I can't to just simply asking this one powerful question. What I heard you say is, how am I going to help myself? And if we actually pause, and you paused and you answered the question and you just did one step at a time. And again, here's the other thing about I think self-leadership is that, leaders don't always know what's going to work. In most cases, they don't, but they're committed to the goal and they're committed to the outcome. So rather than focus on knowing exactly how to get there, they very much focus on what's the next logical step to get there. And let kind of the other the other questions or variables just stay there until they're important. And so for you said, okay, what is the next thing I need to do? I need to get my sleep under control. And then sure enough, like that probably was hugely pivotal because we know how connected sleep is to mental health. And that's as easy as it is, right? Like, I mean, I shouldn't say easy. Easy is not the right word. I like to make the distinction that this is simple work, but it is not easy. And so you made that shift, that simple shift from I can't to how am I going to? That's fun that you can look back on that.
Yeah. And it's fun that you made me think about it that way. And, I also think, and I'm curious your thoughts on this when you think about leadership from the parenting perspective and within your family unit. But when I'm faced with hard decisions for my kids, whether it be choosing a school or choosing a professional to take the next step with, to help with anything, I try to do it from the perspective, and this has been helpful to me, of I'm going to make the best choice that I can make right now. And I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind. And that has been very empowering to me because I think as maybe having some perfectionist tendencies, I also struggled in parenthood with, is this the right choice? And I can only imagine in your realm how often you are faced with having to make, quote, the right choice for your child. So I would love to hear if you have thoughts on that, because I feel like that also falls into the realm of being a leader versus that overwhelm victim mentality, because you're faced with, I watch you, how many choices you are faced with all the time. And I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, I think you've done a great job already of like really describing a decision as one step at a time. That in any moment, you're making a decision with the information that you have, and that at any point you can redecide. And it's simple, not always easy. And I think if we roll things back, I think what has people avoid making decisions is fear, right? So fear of making a mistake or even fear of like something really bad happening. And then, so I think there's two things that come up for me. One is really, really, really believing at a deep level, there is no right decision out there that we have to find. Nobody would be able to actually like prove the right decision before it has been done and proved to be right. Like you can't do that before it happens. And so really trusting that there's nothing out there that you need to find to be able to get the information to make the right decision. So I feel like that already just lets go of like so much pressure because there's nothing then missing for us to make the decision that we think is best or what we would, generally talk about as the right decision. But just really recognizing like the right decision is not the right decision.
Yes.
So that's something that I think comes up. The other thing that I think really comes up, and actually I was focusing on this yesterday, because I think that especially as mother, we have a very unique role. And so my son Levi is at home sick. So he's got a cold virus, so nothing major, but because of his unique medical complexities and all what he has going on, like there's a lot of variables and a lot of vigilance that I need to have as I care for him. And yesterday in the morning, he was upstairs sleeping, which isn't normal, at the time that he was sleeping. And I was noticing that I was anxious, and I just kind of was sitting with myself and doing a couple things to support myself. And it really came down to trusting that I was going to know how to take care of him. And really reconnecting. So it's almost like I saw two different paths. The path where I stay anxious and disconnected and kind of like hovering above it all, like with a lot of like frenetic energy, where for me, it's very hard to connect to anything at that point, hard to connect to my own physical body and to myself and with anybody else. And alternatively, really deeply connecting with myself, centering myself, doing the work of kind of processing that fear that I had, so that because for me, there's this relationship with when I'm centered and connected, I can listen better to my own gut. I can listen better to myself. And so ultimately, I really kind of in that moment grounded myself so that I could hear myself and trust my gut, that I would be paying attention, that I would pick up on those little cues that I needed to be able to take care of him. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it just allowed me to kind of let go of that fear, anxiety, and really just rely on my own intuition and gut. And I think, we underemphasize how important that
mm-hmm.
is. And what a tool that is in any regard of mothership and, of course, leadership. But I think that would be one thing with making decisions, is really just learning to listen to yourself.
Mm-hmm. And how do you, and this is such a huge topic, way more than we could cover here, but as a starting point, when so many parents, when they're faced with trying to move to trusting themselves, they're already in a state of overwhelm. And I do think when I see this all the time when people come to me for sleep coaching, you're in this state of overwhelm and you can't trust yourself because you've tried these things and they haven't worked, or you just don't know what to do. And when you're coaching a parent through like, okay, we want to calm your own anxiety and we want to get you grounded a little bit so you can take that next step and you can trust your gut. Is it meditation? Where's the first place of someone saying, I gotta work on this? Is great, Kara, but how the heck am I going to do that? What do you do? I'm curious I know what I do, but I'm curious what you recommend as that first step.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, it could be that many different conversations. This is also where I really emphasize there's no right way to do this. There's no one answer. And it's very individual. Everyone's starting at a different starting point. Some people might be already very connected to their physical body and really deeply understand how to listen and process feelings. And some people may not have any facility with that. So I think it's really meeting somebody where they're at, or meeting yourself where you're at. And so it's actually such a simple question, but again, not always easy. And a question that we're not used to answering for ourselves as mothers. And the question is, I often ask, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
And again, simple question, but most of us, if we actually sit and answer that question, it's actually really hard, which tells me that we are very well practiced at not paying attention to our own needs. And so I think this kind of actually what's leading me to was really paying attention to our own needs and, wait for it, and giving them to ourselves, meeting our own needs. Again, simple, not easy. And we see this pattern in motherhood. I think it's global, even though I think I definitely see it at a more extreme rate, is this self-sacrificing component, where it's like we think that we're loving so well when we completely neglect ourselves. And I think neglect is the right word. If we really think about like neglect, the atrocity of neglecting a child and what that does to your mother's heart when you hear of a child neglected, I want you to consider that when we are abandoning our own needs, like for a mother, not asking the questions of how am I going to get sleep and how am I going to meet my own needs, and even more so, what do I need? Then I think you realize, oh my gosh, yeah, like it's actually unbelievable that we allow ourselves to get there. And I say that not from a place of judgment at all,
right?
Because it's not surprising at all. It's very understandable. But also when we take a step back and we kind of look at what it's creating, we recognize, oh my gosh, what I'm doing is actually creating the exact opposite of what I want.
I know. I did it for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't make any, and again, here's the such fun part of coaching is oftentimes we recognize that the path that we didn't see to take it's like a relief. It's like, oh my gosh, that's all I need to do. Like, I need to go take care of myself a little bit. And you're like, well, that sounds amazing because I actually want that anyhow. And again, I'm not suggesting that any of this is easy. It's always multi-leveled, but it starts with asking those really, really simple questions. Like you asked, how am I going to help myself right now?
Right.
Or, the question I threw out there, what do I need? And I think one of the things also I'll just add about this question is oftentimes the first response to the question is trying to change a circumstance that we don't have control over.
Mm-hmm.
So like for my community, it'd be like, well, I need my child to not have this diagnosis. Well, that's not an option. They do. So given the reality that you have, and so I think for your community, like given that your child's not sleeping, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope a lot of people are like, well, I need more help and I'm going to go get that help, and they're going to call you. Or they already have called you and they're like, thank God I did.
Right. Or there's people who decide in the newborn days, I need a postpartum doula, or I need a night nurse, or, or some strategy when my baby literally is not capable of sleeping. I need a strategy to allow me to get some sleep. And
I want to, so okay, if I go on a little bit of a tangent about like the getting support thing, and how it relates to leadership. So I think one of the things, if you think about leaders, they're willing to like, kind of looking at like your more traditional, like maybe in a company or kind of maybe more front facing kind of leader that you might imagine. They're willing to do the thing that nobody else is doing. They're willing to put their neck out there. They're willing to be different. And I think that if we then go kind of apply that to common motherhood experiences, I think it's one of the reasons that more moms don't reach out for support or hire the doula, is because if we look around us as moms, especially young moms, more often than not, you're going to see people struggling and tired and generally under-supported.
Yes.
Like losing their identity. Like it's all very, 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 very common. So to look around and to find a mom who is actually doing okay because of the level of support that she's gotten is very rare, if you see it at all. Mm-hmm. And so I think it takes a certain boldness, and this is where this leader component comes in, to be willing to be different, to be willing to be the mom that looks around and is maybe like a little bit alone in a good way, because she's like, actually, I've gotten the support that I needed, and therefore I'm able to sleep at night. Mm-hmm. I'm able to enjoy my baby. Not like everything's perfect, but that she's done something different. I remember I had my own personal experience with this, like very much feeling different in a way that like was actually like, wow, this is interesting. It was many years ago. And I think even before I was coaching the special needs mom community, I was still working outside the home in my old career, at least in some component. And I had a nanny, and I chose to bring in a nanny versus because I had more kids, mm-hmm. right? Like it just financially made more sense to bring somebody in. Plus I was like, I can have them help with house, like basically be the mom mm-hmm. that I wasn't going to be because I was out, right? So cooking, cleaning, all those little things, like light cleaning, not cleaning, tidying, we'll call it. And so I hired very specifically for what I needed. And so we had this amazing nanny, and I was driving and I had this like, oh my gosh, like this is going great. Like I don't feel stressed. Like what is wrong with me? Because I feel really good right now. And I was like, why don't more people do this? I'm genuinely confused. Why do more people not bring people into their home to get more help? And I think a big answer is the price tag. Sure. But I would argue that you haven't investigated it. If that's where you end up, like you haven't maybe done the math,
right?
When it comes up in a bigger picture. But anyhow, I just have this moment, and so I share that because I think that part of my work is actually changing the narratives of what it's like to be a mom, to actually like to be a model of somebody who's very well supported and who goes and gets what she needs and doesn't just sit and suffer. And so I don't know, I just felt like it was important to share, like you may feel very different if you go out and seek help when you see everybody else doing it differently. And that's this leadership part, that you're willing to go and do the different thing and not knowing if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking of what I have needed in different seasons of parenting. So in that moment that we've talked about of when I didn't sleep, what I needed was sleep. And then there was a moment where what I needed was a hobby. And I needed something for myself because I felt very all consumed. At one point, this business was a hobby, like just starting it. It was my little side project. It was so fun. And it is a job that's incredibly fulfilling to me. But there came a point where it stopped feeling like a hobby. And while I loved it, I started to realize something's not quite right. I need something. And when I reevaluated, I thought, oh, I need a hobby. I need something to work on. And I picked up tennis when I turned 40. And that became my hobby. And I have so many moms who say, when I say, come pick up tennis with me, let's do it. And a bunch of moms have. And we've had so much fun, even when we've been terrible. We just had the best time. And then there's another cohort of moms that's like, I can't. I don't know how you find the time. And it's like, but it's what I need. And some of them, I'm looking at my friend and thinking, maybe you don't need tennis, but you need something. I need you, you need something. And sometimes it's more in the moment where when I do get anxious or I feel myself on that spiral, I will have to say, okay, what do I need right now? And sometimes it's, I need a brain dump. So I'll pull out my journal and I'll just write down everything that has me spinning and just getting it out. Sometimes it's, I need a 10-minute meditation. Most recently, and this comes back to making decisions, I was feeling very overwhelmed about a business decision and not sure where I wanted to go in the new year. And I think because of that, I started to get my neck locked up. I broke my neck as a kid. So if ever I get too agitated, my neck's like, oh, we'll just put all your stress right here in your neck. And I thought, what I need right now is a massage. I need a massage. I literally 10 minutes onto that table, I was like, and there's my answer. Like it just, as soon as it was probably some form of meditation without intentionally meditating. Yeah. As soon as she got me to relax enough, it was like crystal clear, something I've been spinning my wheels on. And I feel that way sometimes even with parenting stuff. I just need to take a break. Sometimes I'll be working out or meditating and it's like, that's what my gut wants. My gut, I could start to hear it and say like, okay, that's my answer. I don't need to spin on this anymore. And so I think the need can change season to season of parenting, but also day to day. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, 100%. And I love that we have our love for tennis in common. I'm like so obsessed. I started just playing recently too.
It's so great.
It's so great. I love it so much. There's so much I love about it. Okay. I have this like, you got to come out to California. You got to play. We'll make like a tournament. Okay. Focus. What that made me think of is boundaries. Because boundaries in motherhood. So another thing with leadership, right? Like you have good boundaries. You know when to say no. You know when something's not going to work for you and you're willing to say so. And I'm even thinking, so I have, my oldest is 16 now, and he is just an amazing kid. And he's like a very classic teenager where he wants to talk and chat at night.
Oh, yeah.
And at night, I'm like, okay, so I'm tired and I love you so much. And no, I'm actually like, so some people would be like, oh my gosh, but it's only going to be a couple more years and he's not going to want to hang out with you anymore. So you have to no, sorry. Like I cannot make a decision through the lens of scarcity. This happens all the time, right? That we say, well, but don't do it now, then I'll never get it, or it's going to go away. So I have to. And I'm a stand for like, no, I'm going to take care of what I need to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, Sana, I'm going to spend 5 minutes with you, and it's going to be a great 5 minutes. And then I'm going to tuck you in, and I'm going to go to
Right.
bed because I need my rest. I am not a nice person to anybody if I'm not well rested. And so, I don't know. I think boundaries and learning how to make boundaries in parenthood, I think, is a learning curve.
Yeah.
Because even I, like, not to be like, even I, like, I'm so great, but like, I'm saying that because I have worked on it a lot. And what I've worked on a lot is not feeling badly for doing stuff for myself. And so even however much I've worked on it, it's still not easy for me. It's still like, I still get a lot of messaging in my head that I shouldn't leave my kids so much or whatever the thing is. And so I have to really pay attention to that like script that's just going in the background and really kind of check it against what I'm really committed to. And so I think that this boundary piece, I think, is something to really pay attention to, and to really learning how to make a boundary that does create time for things that like do really light you up and fuel you. And for us, it's tennis, and you know, and for you, like you said, it's like moving, right? Sometimes it's massage, sometimes it's writing, you know, doing a quick brain dump. Like there's so many different ways of supporting ourselves when we're willing to try. One thing I want to mention about that too is when you first start asking yourself that question, you may feel like I have no idea. And so this is where we just go back. Let's just try something. You can try anything. And then sometimes what happens is somebody tries something and like, well, that didn't work. I don't feel any better. And there's two things I have to say about that. One, try something different.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't the thing for you, but also it may not feel good at first. When you have so much resisting, let's just use something like resting, sitting down and resting. It may feel so foreign and unusual, and you may still have so much brain chatter about it. It may not still feel good.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not what you need.
Yeah.
And so I think learning to distinguish like and push through that discomfort and unfamiliarity of doing something that you've not done before, there's that too. And so I think it really requires, and I think this is what you speak of, I'm sure all the time on the podcast, is experimentation and curiosity. So, you know, those are two words that I think we're going to write some Post-its or some inspirational quotes. Let's just write experimentation and curiosity.
Totally. And curiosity is one of my favorite things. Whenever I go down a rabbit hole, I'll always say, well, you guys know I'm curious. So then if my curiosity gets sparked, I'm off down a rabbit hole. And I definitely felt that way when I started meditating. I was like, that didn't work. And my brain never stopped, but I committed to 30 days. And I still wouldn't say I view myself as good at meditating, although I know the good people would say there is no good, but it does work. So what I found after 30 days was I'm seeing results, even though when I'm in the meditation, 80% of the time, I'm thinking, you're blowing this. What are you doing? Come back. Get back here. What's happening? And so, but it does work. So now I can just quiet it down. As soon as I hear myself saying you're not doing a good job, I'm like, yeah, but it's working. That's what I just tell myself. I'm like, it's working. Just keep breathing. It's working. It's happening.
Just keep breathing. Well, I mean, if you apply that, like, it's like if it is the cumulative effort. Where if you go meditate one time, it's probably not going to have a lot of effect. I mean, maybe you'll feel a little bit better. But like if you go do some breathing exercises one time, it's the day after day, the consistency of it that actually does have the impact. I had a doctor on my podcast that he's an expert in autoimmune. And so he's gotten training in, like, he's a medical doctor, he's an acupuncturist, he's all the different things, like, so very different lenses that he's looking through. And one of the things I really took away from what he left is it's the regular consistency and small. It's not doing like a whole 4-hour routine of taking care of yourself. It's literally taking 3 breaths every day that can make a huge difference. And he's a true expert in this. This is what he studies and teaches. And that I thought was really helpful because I do think that we tend to overcomplicate it and it then feels big and then we're like, ugh, too big. Not even going to try that. And so I think, yeah, this experimenting with just one thing, committing to it Or I think now it's like I do a lot of different things. I don't do like any one thing every day.
Right.
I really pay attention to like, well, what do I need now?
Yeah.
Like, what am I led to? Because I think that I have almost like, I keep meaning to like, I want to make like a bingo game of like self-care of like, just as like a brainstorm, like a fun way of brainstorming on like what you might take on of just little things that could be kind of fuel and life-giving.
Totally. Yeah. And I just want to circle back on one more thought I had around boundaries and that neglect and thinking about neglecting your child. When I think about boundaries and what do I need, which involves some boundaries to pursue what I need, and that concept of neglect, I have daughters and you have a daughter. And I will often think to myself when I'm feeling that guilt creep in of, would I want this for my girls when they're older? Would I want them to not have a hobby? Would I want them to feel like they legit don't have time to go for a walk, or they legit don't have time to ever get a massage or do anything to take care of themselves, or they literally don't have 10 minutes to meditate? And so for me, it actually helps me set boundaries with my children and with my husband, because I try to fast forward of, would I want my girls as adults to neglect themselves in this manner? And for me, it allows me to let go of a lot of that guilt. And I just then come at it from the perspective of, I'm demonstrating to them what I hope for them in their future. And so that kind of helps me shut down a little of the chatter in my head that's arguing with me about should I be doing the things that I need. So not only do they allow me to be more present and effective in parenting and my business, but I do think, well, I'm role modeling what I hope my kids will look back and think, well, my mom did those things. She parented and did all those things.
And my mom was happy and grounded and present, right? And so, I think I use the same strategy, because my daughter, 6 years old, really doesn't like when I go out, like anytime, like every time she's upset. And it's funny because she'll say things like, "You are never home,"
Yep.
and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I went out one time last
Yes.
week. Like, what is happening? And so if I let this beautiful, very loud little girl decide what I should and shouldn't do, like I would never do anything. But I think back to, do I want my daughter to have rich, meaningful relationships that she carries with her through her life? Yeah. And so that's, what I'm going to spend time with people that are really meaningful to me. And so I wholeheartedly can say, yeah, I definitely want her to do that. And I want her to have had a mom that she knows had relationships outside of herself. Because I think that puts a lot of pressure on her.
Yes.
If you think about it, like a lot of pressure on her if she's the only thing in my world.
Right.
Or my other kids, obviously. So yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And it can be used obviously for so many different things, like for all the different parts of your own life.
Absolutely. Well, Kara, this has been so great. I could talk to you forever. Can you tell everyone how they can find you?
I'd be glad to. So I do have a podcast. It's called the Special Needs Mom Podcast. And here's what I'll say about that is, clearly I'm speaking to a audience that more commonly than not has a child with any type of disability or medical diagnosis. However, it's all the same coaching. So if you're interested in kind of really looking and examining how you're showing up as a mom, come over, check it out. We'd love to have you. No one's excluded from the podcast. And also I'm over on Instagram at the Special Needs Mom Podcast. And I am on Facebook. I actually don't even know how to find me, but I'm sure you Google it, you'll find it.
Well,
I'm clearly not as active there.
We will be sure to link to all the places in the show notes. And thanks again for joining me today. You are amazing. I am inspired by all the work that you do, and I can't wait to connect with you again soon.
Likewise. Thanks for all the work that you do. I love having moms like you who are modeling the life that I want to. So thank you for that. And thanks for having me on the podcast.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.